Hi and welcome back to my channel. Let's talk about page filters and how you can use them in an ASP.NET Core project. So filters are pieces of code, actually classes in the form of attributes, usually that run code before or after a specific stages in the request processing pipeline. This is actually the official definition of filters when you look at Microsoft Docs. And there are some built-in filters like authorization. You use authorization to check if the user has logged in and has access to the specific page or action in a controller. There are other built-in filters, but of course you can also implement your own filters and add them to MVC pipeline. There are different filter types in ASP.NET Core: authorization, resource, action, exception, and result filter. These filters happen in different stages of request response pipeline. Your endpoint routing, which is a middleware, finds out that you are running a controller or a Razor page and sends the request response through these filters. First, you have to check the authorization because security and access is the most important thing. And then there are resource filter and exception filters. Resource filter is a special one because it is running before any other filter and after all other filters. Then there's exception filter, which is to manage exceptions, and action filter that happens before and after your action. Action execution is actually the part that you usually code in. If you are creating any post or get or put action in a controller, then you are coding in this part of an ASP.NET Core pipeline. But if you want to do something just before the execution of an action or just after that, you can use action filters. Usually, the action filter is what we use because it has the most information about the request or response. It happens just after model binding, so it knows about model and model state and if it's valid or not. And you can read the data in your model and change it, or write something into the database, log it, check the validation, and then you can allow the action to be executed, or you can bypass it and short circuit the action execution itself. Result filter happens just before and after the execution of a result. The result of an action is usually view or file or JSON or redirecting the user. And if you want to change anything about that result, you can use a result filter. Like you can translate the content of an HTML view just before sending it back to the client using a result filter. After the result filter, you go back to resource filter, and then you go back to your MVC middleware or endpoint middleware, and the other middlewares in the pipeline gets running. Filters and middlewares seem similar because they both serve the same purpose. They can be used for cross-cutting concerns, but there are big differences between filters and middlewares. Filters are only available inside MVC middleware, which is called Endpoint middleware in the recent versions of ASP.NET Core. And if you are not using Endpoint middleware, then any of these filters are not available to you. So you can only use filters inside Razor pages or controllers. And if you have a more general requirement, then you need to use middlewares. Middleware has more access and control over what is happening inside the request response pipeline and can even short circuit the whole process, like what static files middleware does or authorization middleware does. But at the same time, the data inside the middleware is too raw to begin with. You don't have the model binding, so you don't have access if the model is valid or not. You have to figure out a lot of things by your own code, and that makes most use cases difficult to implement. So for the most part, you can be done just by creating filters. And the action filter and razor page filter is usually what you need. And any other filters or middleware are all used very rarely. Now let's create a razor page filter. Razor page filters are different than all the other filters that I talked about. They happen in razor pages, and let's see how they work. First, we have a demo application, and I can upload some files like a picture, and it will be shown here. I can download that file like this and view that file. So now I want to have a razor page filter to save this file to a folder like this. This folder is where I store all uploaded files, and inside here I have an upload page. This is a razor page, and I'm just saving the content of uploaded file into disk using file stream, and that's all I'm doing here. So now I want to have a razor page filter that could do all of this part of my code, and I can just have an attribute here to store all files directly without needing this code. Let's create a new item, add new item, and let's go for common and save file attribute. Usually your filters are attributes, but it doesn't have to be. It can just be a filter, a class. So all action filters, all resource filters, and all page filters are classes, and that class could be used like an attribute or could be used like a class service and can be injected indirectly. For this demo, let's use an attribute, and I'm going to use async page filter. This interface implements the necessary methods to my razor page, and I can do with namespaces. There are two methods here, and let's use async and await here. I need to go next, or I can use async and await task, completed task. So any code that you write up here runs before the execution of your razor page handler, and any code that you write here runs after the execution. My hot reloading is working, so here I can use this part for any code that I like to run after the execution of my code. Now let's see if I have a code like this, var e like before and var a like after. And if I use this attribute over this razor page class like this, save file, Now let's run the application in debug mode and have some breakpoints here. One breakpoint here, one here, and you want to see exactly what is happening here. Let's also add a public void on get method just to see what happens with get methods in a Razor page, and have a breakpoint here. Okay, let's run in debug mode. Let's go to files and upload new file, and you see that the first method is running is page handler selection async. Here, as it is mentioned here, it has decided which handler should be used for this request, but the model binding hasn't happened yet. So we have the routing, we have the handler, but no model binding. And let's continue. Here it is model binding. The model binding has happened, but the handler itself is not running yet. So I continue, and when I go next, the handler itself is now running. So model binding happened, and now we are in onGet method. Continue, and now we are running the after part, and continue. The request served, and we are here. Let's run it again. We are here now. So if I upload any file, let's take this picture and upload now, again it is happening. The page handler selection happened, but there are no model binding yet. Next, now model binding has happened in the background, and when I reach to this line, I have access to the model if it's valid or not. Let's continue. Next, and now we are running the OnPost async method, and continue. Then we go to after part and continue. The response has served the client, and user is now redirected to the index page. I want to store the uploaded file before the handler executing, and to do that I don't need this part, and actually we don't have anything to do with this part of the code, but it has to be here because it's an implementation of this interface. So I have it, but I have nothing to do with it. Then let's go here. If you use context here, you have access to many data. Let's go to context, and you go to model state. You see, we have the model state here, and if the model is valid or not, or any errors that has happened inside the model state. So I can validate my Razor page even before it could happen, it could run. I can use is valid here, and if the model state is not valid, I can short circuit the process and redirect user to the form itself, or send an error message, something like that. And validation doesn't have to be inside your method itself, inside your page handler itself. But we are not here for validation, we are here to save files, and to do that I have access to HttpContext, which gives me the request or response information. Inside request you can read host, headers, method, pass, query strings, route values, everything is here. So first of all, I want to make sure that the request is running inside the post method, because we only have body and we have files when the request type is post and it's not get. Let's make sure it is not a get method. And to do that, let's go to method and make sure it is a post method. So if we have a post method, then do these things here. And I can read the current file from context, HttpContext, request for files, index 0. Assuming everything is working and user has uploaded one file at least, then you have 0 index for files to read from. And now the uploaded file is in current file. Let's go back to upload here and let's comment out all these lines. Let's run in debug mode, and now if I go to files and upload new file, you see there's onGet method happening, executing, but at the same time it didn't hit our breakpoint here. So we are filtering out the get method and only focusing on post method. Let's continue. Page loaded. Let's pick a file like this and upload. This time I have a hit on my breakpoint, and let's see what the file is. Current file shows that it is an image, pick number 18, and the length is this, and the name is content file, the name of the field or form field that as model binded is content file. So I have access to a lot of information even before my actual handler could be executed. So let's continue, and now I have my actual handler that is checking if the model state is valid, and now continue. I didn't store the file this time. I want to move this to my filter down in here, and let's uncomment this. Well, let's stop and uncomment this part, and let's change this to content file. We need the environment, so let's go back and inject environment inside our save filter attribute, save file attribute, generate constructor using Visual Studio itself, and hopefully this time we could store the whole file directly into the full files folder. But before that, you will see there's an error here, because now your save file attribute has requirements and you cannot use it directly. When you have dependency injection inside your attributes, your action filters or page filters or any other filters, you can use type filter and use type of and go for save file attribute. It will resolve the dependency injection situation for you and inject all the necessary services into the attribute. You can read a lot more about this in Microsoft documentations, but basically it uses container, IOC container to inject the resources into the class itself. It's somewhat different than usual dependency injection, but it works. Let's try the application again. I'll go to Files, Upload New File. We hit on a Get, it doesn't need it. And let's pick this, pick 40. And upload. Everything happens in the right place. We have our OnPost async method. And now we are done. As you can see, I have my file here. I can download it and I can view it just as before. So now we have a filter as an attribute that we can use to store files. I can make a small change in my file attribute and go through all files in a for each loop and store all of them using this code. There's just some small minor changes you need to make in this code, but I leave that to you. This is a sample Razor page filter. I don't know if it could be useful to you particularly, but this is how page filters work, and this is how you can inject the services inside your filters. Remember that Razor page filters should be used over the whole class. You cannot have this attribute only over on get method or on post method. So Razor page filters happen or execute for both on get and on post method or any other handler that you have inside your Razor pages. And if you want to filter out them, you need to use some conditions like this and make sure that your code is running over the correct handler. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. You can download this source code from my GitHub page and see you soon.